Hello. One of the most requested cruisers as of late has been the Hindenburg and the commentary on it. Now, I'm probably fairly known that I actually really like the Hindenburg, but I have to say I have been a bit disappointed with it as of late. Well, not the ship itself, of course. The ship is just simply a victim to the significantly more passive meta, which has made it quite challenging to get as much out of it. Also, one of the strengths which it used to have, which was of course the fantastic German Hydro, this used to be such a potent strength and made it very unique, but with the power creep in other forms of the game or in other shapes, for example, we now have the other cruisers having radar. We have both the Russians and the American ships with radar, which has better range. And then we have the Royal Navy cruisers that also have hydro. So suddenly this long-range German hydro on the Hindenburg isn't really that special anymore. Then we of course have the German battleship line, which also has German hydro. So once again we see a lot of power creep in other forms, whereas the Hindenburg has pretty much remained exactly the same. In fact, the only significant change to the Hindenburg has been the buffing of the HE shells, and the weak HE was never really one of the things I wanted buffed on the ship. I was always perfectly fine with having weak HE with low fire chance, as long as the AP remained consistent. But one of the issues, of course, with the Hindenburg is that the AP shells are extremely light. It means that yes, you got some good arcs, they're fast, they do a lot of damage, but they don't really have that great penetration. Especially at very long ranges, the penetration falls down quite heavily and you struggle to deal with any sort of angled targets with the AP, which is of course a shame, especially considering ships like the Moskva, the Mo and Zhao. These don't really suffer from the same issues with their AP. It's in fact stronger at long range. Now, I like to play quite aggressive whenever I can with my cruisers. This is no different. I am playing solo in this game, but because there's so much cover offered, this is one of the few T10 maps where you actually got enough cover that you can push up without being absolutely murdered by battleships. The Friedrich der Grosse does get a hit on me, but it's not too big of a deal. I use my German Hydro to push into B, I use the islands to hide myself, and I'm trying to either kill this Kagero, force him out of the cap, and secure it for myself. This is something, of course, you struggle with on a lot of maps simply because of, well, the atrocious map design. It makes it quite hard. There are some T10 carriers in this game, which is pretty unfortunate because on the German ships you sadly have to choose between Hydro and defensive AA, much like on many of the others. And if you choose defensive AA, well, then you lose one of the special things. Of course, the rail-like guns, flat arcs, good accuracy, a lot of shells means that you kind of wreck DDs when you get within range. So many hits, even though each shell doesn't deal too much damage, the fact that you're hitting so many shells at a time means that you tend to kind of murder these DDs. Wait, he's still alive? That means someone's gonna steal him, doesn't it? Oh no, actually got the kill. Fantastic. Now I can of course secure the cap. Switching... Do I want to switch to AP? Actually, I gotta be a bit worried about being flanked from sea at this point, since I do know they have some battleships pushing up. But in general, I just want to capture this point. The mid-wave striking me could be a bit of an issue, but in general, they don't really tend to go for the Hindenburg, because of course, if you have defensive AA, then the Hindenburg AA is very strong. So it's a bit of a gamble that you run Hydro in the hopes that you won't be struck, which it can work out great, as in here you can push in and have a significant impact with it, or you might be chosen as a target, especially I tend to, because of my name, get chosen as target, and then it can backfire. Moskva giving broadside. Now this is one of those cases where of course, wow really? Where I hit the wall apparently, but one of those cases where of course close range, flat broadside target, this is one of those cases where the Hindenburg is of course monstrously powerful. And I use the reload mod on the Hindenburg, which means that insane DPM really gets to work on this Moskva. He really needs to be angling against me. I gotta stop though, I can't push any further because Friedrich der Grosse is sitting there just waiting for me to peek out. So I'm just gonna slow down. I have to let this guy flee. But the problem comes there, as soon as he starts angling even a bit, well, my HE loses all of its potency. It doesn't just get toned down, it just straight up loses pretty much all of its potency, and I just get bounces. At this point I should really just be using HE, which I'm switching to now. Yeah, you see, just 0 damage. Straight up, it doesn't even drop gradually. Like, even Royal Navy tends to get some sort of plunging shell hits with their AP, but on the German AP, the damage just straight up drops to 0, which is pretty demoralizing considering you're supposed to be this AP cruiser. That was a great smoke by the Yugama, by the way. I think he might have meant it more for the Takao than for me, I don't know. Either way, fantastic smoke. I switch back to AP since the Friedrich de Grosse is here, and I'm gonna push up. Once again, broadside means the AP, of course, when you do get broadside, because you have so many shells, you shoot 12 of these shells, and even normal penetration, non-citadels do a lot of damage, means that you can do these really strong volleys, anywhere from 8 to closing in on 20k, even if you get really lucky with penetrations, and you can do a lot of damage to battleships if they leave their broadside up. And once again, as I run the reload mod, that means this DPM is actually one of the strongest AP DPMs in the game. In fact, it even defeats the Des Moines AP DPM, so definitively no joke. But of course it doesn't have the same angles or the weight and in general the penetration of the Des Moines AP, so it needs more special circumstances to be effective. So one of the things I have been heavily considering a lot of these T10 maps are very open, and wow, really, I'm not just doing 0 damage. I should just switch to HE. I'm greedy, I really want that penetration damage, but wow, yeah, that's just a waste of time, isn't it? Oh, is he aiming at me? No. Always keep an eye out where battleships are aiming. The Hindenburg is a bit trickier to citadel than many of the other tier 10 cruisers. But that doesn't mean that if a big enough battleship decides to blast you that you can't get citadeled, and even if you don't, you're going to be eating heavy damage. So of course giving any sort of broadside is an invitation to get absolutely wrecked. Switching to HE, see if I can finish him, but he's just fleeing. I don't really want to waste too much time hunting this one dude either. Now, as I was saying, I have been heavily considering, simply because of the very open T10 map design and because of how passive the game and the meta has in general become, I have been heavily considering switching to the range mod instead of the reload mod. Yes, I love the DPM, but there are times when the lack of range that comes from using the reload module has been quite frustrating, and especially when you're sitting in these very passive games, having to push up closer than everyone else and being shot at. Since the Hindenburg really isn't that stealthy, it isn't the most agile. I mean, it's not too clumsy either. It's a good middle ground, but still, when you are in a cruiser, every single battleship is gonna be shelling you. So I've been heavily considering switching out for the range module, and in fact, that's something I intend to be doing today, trying a few games with the range module and see how I feel about it. Of course, if you want to be playing a longer range cruiser, then the Hindenburg really isn't for you. If you want to be playing a longer range cruiser, then stuff like Zao and Moskva are fantastic at this. These are the optimal long range cruisers. But on my channel, I always try to recommend the most optimal build for any ship, regardless. And I don't care what other ships you have, I don't care how much better suited for the role another ship would be. Like, for example, when I recommended my range module on the Moskva, I got a lot of commentaries that, why don't you just use your Zao for this purpose then? Well, just because the Zao is better at it doesn't mean that I don't still consider it an optimal build for the Moskva as well. So I will always try to recommend the absolute greatest build, regardless of how much it might infringe on the territory of another ship. In this case, of course, going for the range mod is going to it will weaken its straight up close range power, its close range DPM, but the long range power will gain a significant buff, especially the HE potency. So I'll have to see, I'll have to test around, but for now I'm still using my standard Hindenburg build. I will of course go over it at the end. What I'm doing here is, our Hakuryu is pretty awkwardly positioned, and the Kurfürst obviously wants him. So I am looking to exploit this Kurfürst's hunger to shoot at this Hakuryu. Stupidly enough, this Kurfürst is underestimating me, and this tends to happen quite a bit when you're not spamming HE and you're not setting fires on them. They're thinking, It's not too much damage that I'm eating, but it really is a lot of damage, especially on a reload mod Hindenburg. The reload is what, 8.8 seconds I think with the when you run the reload mod. Let me check. Yeah, I think it's around something like that. So the constant DPM that you shell, especially on a broadside target, well, it varies. You can see one 6-gun volley did 800 damage, but it can vary greatly from 10,000s to apparently 0 damage. Of course, this is one of my major complaints. He angles a bit, suddenly damage drops to 0. I really don't like this, and I feel the AP should be more forgiving. It feels silly that the AP specific T10 cruiser has worse AP than pretty much all the other ones. Even the Zao, which is the ultimate HE spammer, has much better AP than the Hindenburg has, which is pretty ridiculous in terms of penetration, of course. When it comes to straight up damage, well, then you're still the king. But now he's actually giving a fair amount of broadside. His secondaries are opening up for me. He's rushing that Hakuryu, but he's finally, I'm so close that I can start doing constant penetrations. I can even aim more for the belt instead of just aiming for his superstructure. And this is where the damage really starts ramping up, and you start seeing these heavy hits. But the Hakuryu manages to steal the kill from me. That's pretty typical, honestly. How much damage did I do to him? I don't even know. Oh, and someone says, nice CV. Well done, Hakuryu, you soloed that guy. Well, regardless, if a battleship does what he does there, which was, in my opinion, well, he considered the Hakuryu the bigger threat, which was pretty damn stupid. A cruiser getting as close, a Hindenburg especially getting that close, it's the same thing as a Des Moines getting that close. The non-stop AP damage that you'll be eating is absolutely massive. If he really wanted to rush the Hakuryu, he should have been angling against me, so he absolutely, without a doubt, played that wrong. Of course, now I see an angled Yamato. This AP completely useless at this point. I already know that my damage would be 0, so I switch to HE. And it's of course for this reason, for these situations, that I run Demolition Expert instead of AFT. I mean, AFT can be useful, but considering I don't really run defensive AA that often, if I queued up with carriers more, then running AFT would probably be a great choice. But since I tend to solo queue quite a bit, especially with the Hindenburg, I just run Demolition Expert, and especially in situations like this when you face a lot of angled battleships and AP is useless, having that increased fire chance actually significantly improves your fire starting ability, since you spam shells so quickly and you shoot so many of them, and your accuracy is still fantastic. So just getting a lot of burns going is great. Sadly, he ate a bunch of torps, so that's probably gonna, my chances of getting a lot of damage out of him is probably gonna be quite wrecked. I do have 2 fires on him though, and he doesn't have any repair, so that should be a kill. There we go, and he burns to death. Of course, with all the torpedoes helping, that was a lot faster than it usually would be. This game is quite close, in fact, though. It's actually a 3 versus 3, but our Hakuryu is dead, their midway is still alive. But we do have the ship advantage, but I'm not entirely certain where this Atago is. His position is, well, all of our position is a bit off the map, to be fair. Mine mostly because I went to help the Hakuryu against the Kurfürst. So, the Hindenburg, I do feel it struggles a bit in the current meta. I will make another commentary both with the range module, and I will make some without the range modules, especially when it comes how to dealing with certain other ships that it tends to be issues. For example, how to deal with Zaos and such 1v1, because of course a Zao has significant advantages over you 1v1, but the terrible turret angles means that you can still punish him if he tries to go for any sort of significant damage. But that's a case for the next commentary. Let's see this Ruin. Can I finish him? Ruin is, of course, if you give broadside, you can still use AP at long ranges, because you still do a significant amount of damage. But if they angle even the slightest bit, that's when your damage really drops down. And if someone asks me what do I think would be the best change for the Hindenburg, well, just reduce the power of the HE. I mean, that's what that's what Wargaming is the most worried about, it seems, all the time. HE spammers from long range. but for some reason they never do anything about the ZA, don't ask me why. But they really seem to fear these long-range AG spammers, as seen by the nerfs on AFT and Mogami and such things. So if they're so afraid of it, just nerf the HE some more on the ship and just give it more consistent, more potent AP. The Hindenburg would be extremely competitive with all the other T10 cruisers if the AP was more consistent. But there is no doubt that its biggest weakness right now is that it's a heavily AP focused cruiser that doesn't really have the guns to back up, the AP to back up that statement, that suggestion, which is a bit of a shame, because I really love the ship, I love the playstyle of it, I love the idea of a more hydro focused cruiser that can push in and be more aggressive, and it's not as long range focused. It's like a hybridization of the Des Moines and maybe the Moskva, something in between. In general, I just love the Hindenburg as a ship, but it's not at the place that I'd want it to be. There are many situations where, especially when I shoot volleys at very slightly angled cruisers, and I know that if I was playing a Des Moines or I was playing a Moskva, even if I was playing a ZA, I know that my AP volley would have crushed that person. But because I'm playing my Hindenburg, all I get is a bunch of bounces and deflections and 0 damage. And that is of course quite frustrating. I instantly shoot down that fighter squad, by the way, that he left hovering around. Because of course, even with defensive AA, your AA is very strong on the ship. I of course run the AA range increase module, because that is what I recommend. In fact, I will go over my current build, because this is the Hindenburg build I've been using for a long time, and this is one that I have been in general quite satisfied with. And until I have thoroughly tested the range module on the Hindenburg, this will be the build that I recommend. I will make some tests and a commentary on the range module, and I will return to you regarding that later. Now, this was from my stream, so as you might be expecting, you can see my stream overlay here for the score, but the game ended with 246,000 damage, and of course I got the usual high caliber Confederate and stuff, which is quite nice. Not too many plane kills, but then again I was running Hydroacoustic Search. Base XP managed to break 3000, which is of course always satisfying to do in a cruiser, especially in the Hindenburg, as it doesn't get the same bonuses that the Des Moines, for example, does when it comes to XP. And you can see the damage here. High explosive only did 41k and fires only about 17k, so very small percentage. Ultimately it was still fully AP focused. A huge part of it, of course, the Kurfürst that kept giving me broadside. But this, I mean, the ship is strong, and results like this certainly back up the claim that it is strong, but I do not like the weakness of the AP right now. Regardless, let me go over my recommended build, and the build that I have been using for quite a while, since it's been a while since I actually did cover the Hindenburg. Right, as usual, I will start with the modules, not much to talk about. T10 ship. Consumable wise, I always recommend the premium damage control and premium heal. And regarding the second consumable, depending on what you face, you can use Hydro or you can use defensive AA. I always recommend the fighter aircraft instead of the spotter one, of course. So this is depending. If you queue with the CV, defensive AA. If you don't find yourself facing a lot of CVs, just go for Hydro. Upgrade wise, main armaments mod 1, AA gun range. You don't really need the aiming system because you spam so many shells anyway. It's more about increasing that AA range. Reload, once again, this is my recommended default build because I find the ship is so much stronger at closer range than at range, but I will be trying the range module as well. Damage control 1, steering gear system 2, concealment system mod 1. Very default T10 cruiser build. And my usual build here is basic survivability, expert marksman, superintendent, demolition expert. Once again, if you queue with carriers a lot, then and concealment expert. If you queue with carriers a lot, then going AFT instead of DE is definitely a very valid choice. And of course, the last 3 points will be going into vigilance to dodge those torpedoes. That's very important if you play the aggressive style with the reload mod. Of course, if you do get AFT, you buff these significantly. You get 7.2 km on the AA range, which makes the ship quite an anti-air monster as well. So there is that option available as well. Anyway, this was my current Hindenburg commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it.